It's just incredible. The quickening of events it's just exciting.
Yeah, things are speeding up.
Like today, let me just mention a couple of quick stories that came out today.
Mm-hmm.
The Finland Parliament is discussing openly in a debate after a petition with 50-something thousand signatures was submitted. The Finland Parliament is discussing their exit from the European Union. Okay, that's one. Then Gazprom announced annual profits that were up 5-fold. So it looks like the sanctions against Russia, once again, didn't mean a twit. Then there's a news story about Venezuela importing 500,000 barrels of oil from the United States in a tanker recently. They're so strapped in cash, Will, that they don't have enough cash to buy high-quality Nigerian oil to mix with their heavy crude, thick Orinoco heavy crude in Venezuela, to mix it together to make it exportable. Mm-hmm. So the cash crunch in Venezuela is now limiting their ability to export their own low-quality oil.
Wow. Yeah.
A lot of things going on. It's just exciting. I wish there were better news to talk about from the U.S. perspective, but you know, when you adopt the Rubin doctrine of sell out tomorrow for another day of prosperity for Wall Street, that's the Rubin doctrine. Yeah. Sell out the future of America to make sure that the profits look good for the next quarter in Wall Street. Yeah. If you do the Rubin doctrine for enough years, and then you adopt the fascist business model after 9/11 with an endorsement with the Patriot Act, you end up destroying the country. Mm-hmm. And I'm not speaking in silly exaggerations. They've destroyed the country. The too big to fail bank policy of rescues, they saved the banks at the expense of the economy. Mm-hmm. They wrecked the economy in order to keep the banks going. Mm-hmm. And now the banks are going to fall, and we're going to have a systemic failure of the country.
Yeah, and a massive concentration of wealth into the hands of the few who orchestrated the whole thing the whole time.
Yeah, that's part of the fascist business model that I discuss. I mean, it's just incredible what's going on. You can't bail out the banks like they have. You can't print money to bail out the government like they have. You can't wage war to defend the dollar like they have and expect that 2016 and 17 are going to be normal. No, they're going to be breakdown years. Mm-hmm. We're in 5 years now of QE, which is African, Zimbabwe monetary policy of hyper-monetary inflation, unsterilized, which means they don't drain money out of the system in order to push money into the system to cover the federal debt. They just add more money in like Robert Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. When are we going to wake up, Will, that we're running an African-style policy for the dollar?
Well,
we're not going to wake up until the rest of the world rejects the dollar. And where will they reject it? In the shipping ports. Mm-hmm. That is the big battleground right now.
Interesting, Jim. So the Venezuela story is could be used as sort of a microcosm example, could it not? I mean, downward spiral there. They've depreciated the currency so bad they're out of cash, and their main export they can't even export because they have no money, because there's no liquidity.
Well, they're exporting rice and beans, and therefore they're having food shortages.
Uh-huh.
I have a phrase that when you have a severe currency crisis, you want to export everything you can. So they export anything that's not nailed down, and it causes shortages of what they exported.
Right.
And that, I think you call it a microcosm, and I think that's a very good word to use and an example. The United States could face that same situation, where we export most of what is made in the United States in order to relieve the trade deficit, which is $500 billion a year.
Right.
if we have to come up with a new dollar for domestic only because we've lost the global currency reserve status, that's precisely the pressure that's going to have to be alleviated. You can't have a domestic only dollar without an immediate effect on it from the deficits. And it's a $1 trillion annual federal deficit, which could, honestly, it could be filled and covered rather easily if they just confiscate all the 401 and all the IRA and all the KEO funds. That's about $1 trillion a year. So then they'd be left with the trade deficit, which is $45 billion a month, rather consistently, which is $500 billion a year, $500 billion. You cannot have a stable currency in that kind of deficit situation. And this is pressure that's coming, Will. It's coming like as certain as tomorrow's dawn. But I think the big story we were talking about before the recording is the silver breakout, which I featured in an article just a few days ago.
You did, yeah. Today is Friday, April 29th, and you had an article that came out this past Tuesday, the 26th, titled "Long-Awaited Gold Breakout." And you went into a couple different formations that silver, specifically silver, has shown. I think a daily and then a weekly, and with a price point anticipation of an $18 silver price breakout. And here we are today at just pennies, literally pennies under $18. What caused you to obviously write that article? That this breakout in the metals is a substantial one. What we've witnessed here, I mean, silver's up, 15-20% here in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, what motivated was the big move in gold in January. I noticed that gold was moving in every major currency except the dollar. So I concluded that, give it a couple months and you'll see the dollar version of gold, gold in dollars, make its breakout. But there are a lot of people who have been thinking, and I have been among them, that gold will make the big breakout and then silver will come along and just fly on through after gold breaks down the door. Think of it as breaking down the door like in a Robin Hood movie, attacking the French castle. Remember the most recent Russell Crowe movie? They break down the door and then just run through. Well, the ones running through are not the ones who broke down the door. Often there are a lot of dead bodies from those who broke down the door. But what we see now in the last month is a very clear silver breakout. Now, I'm not talking about a multi-year breakout. I'm talking about a breakout from the resistance levels that have prevailed for the last several months, maybe even a year. So, I remember back in, 2011 or late 2010, I can't remember exactly. I think it was 2011. Silver hit 50. We're not there yet. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Really, the damage was done and the consolidation has taken place. But in the last month, we have a breakout. Take a look at the weekly silver chart, and you see a cup and handle, which means it dithers around the 16 level, dips down to 14, recovers up to the 16 resistance level, makes the right side handle dithering around before it has the gumption and the power to move above 16. But in the last 3 weeks, it did move above 16. Well, you take a look at the levels there. The resistance was 16 and it dipped down to 14. There's a 2-point potential. Add that to the 16 breakout and you get 18 as a target. Okay, that's all very nice. It's all very clean. And it's all very reliable as a breakout pattern, a reversal breakout pattern. All right, now turn to the silver daily chart, and you've got a slightly upward bias rectangle, which means you've got an upper level and a low level, and it's just ranging between the two. But the two horizontal resistance points are not really flat. So there's an upward bias, but it's got a 2-point differential between the two parallel lines. Mm-hmm. Now, the fact that they're not horizontal is only more positive that they're upward tilted. And the 2 points add to the resistance level of 16. And there again, different pattern, same market in silver, different perspective, different pattern, and different, but the same target, 18. And here you said that we touched it in Kitco, but we haven't touched it in, well, what I look at is the bullion desk.
Bullion desk. It may have been kissed, and it's just, trading
came
right
back down slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got some resistance at 1830, and I think what we're going to see is a move up past 18 to about 1830, and then come back down to 17 and a half, and then when more of the system just breaks down and is more evident that things are not right and there's going to have to be a lot more infusion of money, we're going to see higher price. One of the most important points to keep in mind regarding the gold and silver market right now is that for the last maybe 10 or more years, we've seen a rather suppressed gold price and silver price, but we've seen an increase of between 5 and 10 times the number of dollars floating around. The Lehman fix has resulted in a tremendous increase in, for instance, the Federal Reserve balance sheet. They're sitting on $4.5 trillion worth of toxic bonds. Okay, so the point is we've had a 5 to 10 fold increase in money. And the clowns come out and say, "Oh gosh, you can't have gold backing all that. There's not enough gold." Well, sure there is. At $8,000 to $10,000 gold price, sure there is.
Jim,
if you increase by tenfold the number of dollars, you should have increased by tenfold the price of gold, but it was suppressed. So now it's catch-up time.
Jim,
that's what's coming. Well, that's what's coming. The Chinese have dictated to the U.S. that we will have a $10,000 gold price to back the new currencies.
Jim, before we go into Shanghai and basically how this metals breakout plays in, why it's important right now based on what's happening geopolitically and with Jim's work. Have you, this is a side piece, Jim, that we didn't discuss. Have you by chance been to the usdebtclock.org?
No, and I mean, not lately. I've looked at it in the recent past, a couple months ago.
Somebody recently pointed this out to me, and I never noticed it before, but if you pull up usdebtclock.org and you look in the lower right-hand corner, it brings a dollar to silver ratio and it brings a dollar to gold ratio based on monetary creation, or at least based on the U.S. national debt. And Jim, I'm looking at it right now in the lower right-hand corner of usdebtclock.org. Dollar to silver ratio now $779 per ounce.
Yeah, but what's the basis of the silver volume?
I believe it's based on the debt. So all of these different all these different numbers that are shown on here. Total debt per citizen, total debt per family.
I'm not talking about the dollar amount. Well, I'm talking about the silver amount. What's the basis of the silver volume to come up with that?
With that number, yeah, I don't know. They've got a number on gold as well, $7,022 per ounce. Dollar to gold ratio.
Well, it all sounds very nice and very optimistic, but until I see defined what the denominator is for the amount of silver, I kind of yawn.
Yeah, no, I mean, good point. But the fact that this is up here is interesting, and the number. Yeah. I mean, they fit perfectly with the numbers that you're mentioning, right? I mean, just based on monetary creation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's all very positive. What we need in order to get some equilibrium into the system is a breakdown of the COMEX, and where they go dark, where they get sued out of existence, where their operators are prosecuted for financial fraud. I mean, they're doing contracts in gold, but not delivering the gold. And I like to just make the joke. Suppose you buy a car, and now you've got everything all lined up for the payment. You want the keys so you could drive it away, and they say, "Oh no, you can't have the keys, but you can buy another one."
That's a great point.
How absurd would that be? Or keys to the house. You can't occupy your house. Sorry. I know you bought it, or you've made a significant margin payment toward it, and you're prepared to pay the rest, but you cannot pick up the title or the keys to your house to live in it, but you can buy another.
You can buy more, or they'll settle you in cash, right?
Or they'll settle you in cash so that, thanks for your interest in this car or your interest in the house, but you can't have it. You can get your money back at the current value of the house. Mm-hmm. In other words, there's no gold market anymore in the United States. Mm-hmm. There's no silver market. And I love pointing out 3 factors in silver. It's called the live market. One is the live market. It's a super spot market where on an emergency basis, if you need to get your hands on $2 million worth of silver to satisfy a very large contract with multiple parties, and you don't care that you have to pay more because you need the silver, and you might pay a 20 or 40% premium on buying the silver. The live market has none anymore. No silver. That's one. The other one is that the more recent minted silver coins, like that are over 3 years old, they're getting an extra premium now. They're not priced the same as a 2016 or 15 minted silver coin. There's a premium, much like what you see in the collector's items, not as big as, say, a 80-year-old coin or a 120-year-old coin. So collector's premium on silver for nearby years has gone up. And the last one is that the recycle market is pretty much vanished for, say, silverware on a dining set. Mm-hmm. It's going straight to the refiners. There's no intermediate anymore. There's no discount for the intermediaries who would go to, say, the estate sales and lap it up and take their 10 or 15% profit. That whole industry is gone. We got some major changes coming. And it's exciting because I foresee sometime before this year is over that we could very likely see another move in silver like what we had 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see a move real soon, like in the next month or two, over $20, capturing a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. And here's a new little twist to the silver market that's quite interesting. There's a lot of reports out there that J.P. Morgan is accumulating physical silver. Mm-hmm. And you can't really say, oh, gosh, it looks like they're becoming an honest broker. No, it looks like they're becoming Chinese brokers. Uh-huh. Remember that 2 years ago, J.P. Morgan lost its headquarters to Chinese conglomerate property owner. Mm-hmm. They lost ownership of their giant, one Chase One Plaza, One Chase Plaza. Yeah. They lost their gold vault that's connected to the Federal Reserve. A lot of stories that maybe China owns a significant, if not controlling interest to the Federal Reserve now among all the partners. Wow. So China might have employed J.P. Morgan to replenish their silver stockpile, or at the same time, interwoven with that, China might be forcing the United States government to use J.P. Morgan as the agent to replenish the silver from the lease that the United States government reneged on. We renege on every lease and every treaty for the last freaking century.
And this was specific to China, a silver lease with China?
Yes.
Wow. Well, Jim, in our community, I mean, those that have been aware of the silver, the physical silver mass that has been, amassed by J.P. Morgan here, Ted Butler's covered it pretty extensively. We've been pretty concerned. Hey, man, this is one of the most evil entities in the control of in the suppression of the metals prices. I remember our friend Blythe Masters over there what's going on with this, and you think it may have to do with the Chinese, so it might even all be Chinese silver. It's not J.P. Morgan's, potentially.
Well, remember the 1999 most favored nation status given to China.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was sort of greasing the wheels and the skids for the transition of Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, in 1999, there was reportedly also a rather large gold and silver lease. They call it the Mao Zedong, the Mao era gold hoard. I believe there was also a silver element to that. And it was leased to the United States. It was dumped on the market. It bought them another 5 years. Mm-hmm. And now we've reneged on it. We can't give back the leased silver when we sold it. Mm-hmm. That's how we keep the market down, keep suppressing gold and silver down. We keep either leasing or stealing. We've stolen the Germans and the Dutch and the Austrian gold. That's what the repatriation conflicts are all about. We stole the Ukrainian gold, 33 tons. That bought another month. We stole the Libyan gold. There are reports. I'm not saying it's true, but there are reports and forensic reports that the dead body is not Gaddafi. He has certain birthmarks. And, I like to point out on the right side of my neck, I've got a big... It's not a wart. It's like we call it a beauty mark. But, I got to be careful when I'm shaving on the right side of my neck at the base because it's a big thing. It's like a half an inch in diameter, and it raised off. Okay, I got that. I got a mark, okay?
Yeah.
But I've also got a scar on my left knee from a knee surgery, okay? That's how you would identify. Okay, there's a dead body. Is that Jim? Well, let's take a look. Do an x-ray of the left knee. Is there a titanium screw in there? This is how you identify a body. This is basic forensics 101. Mm-hmm. Apparently, it's not Gaddafi's body. So he's waiting in the weeds and the wings for the right moment to come forward and say, I want Libya's 144 tons of gold back. It's in the London banks, but he'll be told you can't have it back because we sold it into the market. But we got a new idea to start a war in Chad and steal their gold to give it back to you in Libya.
Oh, my God.
Okay, this is how absurd the U.S. gold management has become.
Unbelievable, Jim.
We got a new war that we got. It's a great idea. You'll love it. In 7 years, you can have your gold back. If you think this is absurd, it's not, because it's exactly what we told Germany.
And what about when Gaddafi says, well, yeah, but Chad is my trading partner. I buy oil from him or whatever. I mean, the U.S. says, too bad. You want your gold, don't you?
Well, then they might say, well, don't worry. We got other opportunities. We might invade Angola. We're the exceptional nation. We can do anything. We can declare Angola loaded with terrorists.
Right.
Those who accuse of terrorism are the terrorists. Mm-hmm. The French have a wonderful phrase. I studied French in high school. I kicked my butt almost every day for choosing French in high school. Studied it 3 years. I actually got the French award in my junior year among maybe 150, 180 kids. The phrase is, il qui accuse s'accuse. He who accuses is accused himself.
Whoever smelt it, dealt it.
Yeah. So if someone goes running around and say, oh, he's a terrorist, that's your terrorist. Mm-hmm. If you have someone going around saying, oh, he's a thief, he's a fraudmeister, that's your fraudmeister. Okay, the U.S. is running around calling all these nations terrorists. Like, who are the recent terrorists? Well, you got Syria, they're loaded with terrorists. You got Iran as a nation of terrorists. Mm-hmm. You've got Yemen as a nation of terrorists. So these are all targets for attack by U.S. military and their allies, and usually it's to capture resources. I've been saying for over a year, the Yemen war is for Saudi Arabia to replenish their oil reserves. They're depleted. There are more stories coming out every month now about Yemen being loaded with oil and gas. So they're full of terrorists, and the Saudis are going to attack them.
Well, and
if that means bombing their hospitals and bombing their schools, well, okay, because that's where the new terrorists grow up from.
Yeah, and if there's no actual terrorists there, we'll just plant some there. We'll hire these mercenary groups, and we'll give ISIS some resources, and we'll just tell them to move there.
Well, I like to talk about correct forecasts, and I especially like to talk about unusual ones.
Mm-hmm.
The most unusual one I had was in 2011. I said, since there'll be no more justice among banker crime, we're going to see the bankers getting murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that came about. Now you're seeing a lot of unusual stuff going on with respect to terrorism. But last August, when it became clear that a lot of the boat people from Syria were being dumped on Italian shores for points north, destinations north in Central Europe, I immediately started investigating. And a question that came to my mind, it wasn't from an article I read, it's just from curiosity and the way I think with a lot of critical questions. Who's paying for the passage for all these thousands of poor sots supposedly coming from Syria, and are they really coming from Syria? And the answer I got was the Soros NGO groups were paying for their passage. I included immediately that this was a dumping exercise with a motive, so I concluded in my August hat-trick letter that we're going to see some terrorism events in a major city of Western Europe, and we got it in September in Paris, France. This is how I put things together, in an unusual way. The terrorism there is not exactly a finance issue unless you consider that the Rothschilds want to dump North Africans and Syrians all across Western Europe so that they can mix in a lot of hired terrorists. And I think that's exactly what's going on. Well, the point is wreck the European economy in a last step, because as you were saying in some of the northern European areas, the women are not even going out after dark.
Right. And
because there are roaming gangs of Arabs that are raping and assaulting.
Yeah, there's like public warnings, in fact, in Germany and certain parts of the Netherlands, or I'm sorry, Scandinavia.
Yeah, Denmark, I hear, is on alert. And Sweden has numerous rape murders.
I talked to a guy from Finland a couple months ago, face-to-face, and he was almost in tears about it. He was that distraught about it.
And these are decisions made not by their parliaments, but by the elites.
Yeah.
And the United States is no different. United Parcel Service is shipping in plane loads of undocumented Syrians and North Africans into New Orleans right now. A UPS vice president objected to it, and he was fired.
Just another way our country is completely under attack right now.
Yeah, if I dump a lot of collected human feces into your living room, do you think it might have an effect on the way your household operates?
Well, not only does it have an effect on the operation of the household, Jim, it also has a pretty incredible dilutive effect. It draws attention. There's so much stuff going on that people should be paying attention to, and so we're going to create another catastrophe or terror event or something over here just to dilute the votes or what have you.
Yeah, I suppose, and in the United States, it's a little different. Obama likes shipping in Africans in order to collect new votes for the Democrats the next round. I mean, how many tens of thousands of Somalis, illegal Somalis, voted in Ohio for Obama? And for that matter, how many districts in Pennsylvania had 0 votes for Mitt Romney?
Yeah.
So, the voter fraud is just one more nail on the third world coffin for the United States. I actually could go on for an hour about statistical perspective of voter fraud and the whole election system, like Hillary buying poll results several months ago to make herself look good going into the primaries, Diebold software being rigged.
Yep.
Exit polls. Exit polls is one of the most statistical element stories that I could bring up about voter fraud, because you don't really see a lot of real high correlation in this world at the social level, and voting is kind of a social science. Well, there's usually a 90% correlation. This would be the last thing I say about voter fraud. There's around a 90%, 92, 89% correlation between, at the district level, the exit polls and the actual voting results. And that was not the case in oodles and oodles of Florida and Ohio districts in the last two elections.
Yeah.
That's your proof, because you could say, well, it should match with a probability of 90%. You know, rough. You could. It's not an exact interpretation, but for a heuristic, it's very good. Well, gosh, if you had so many that didn't match, what's the probability that each lack of match was a 1 in 10 probability? Well, you throw it out and say, well, you got 6 million to 1 possibility of something like that happening. Well, therefore, your hypothesis of an actual fair voting system is thrown out the window. That's called a hypothesis test in statistics, and that's what we do. So you got so many things that are just sickening with the fraud. And you know, one of my favorite little items about the U.S., favorite stories to cite as demonstration of the breakdown of the U.S. toward a third world, is that in the year 2015, there were 1,600 cases where the police robbed people of their cash at the roadside.
Yeah.
1,600. And the claim is your extra cash, like you got $400 in cash in your attaché case in the back seat, we're going to take that. Under what grounds, officer? Under the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
That is suspicious money for narco trafficking.
Yeah. Jim, we have our clients have to consistently go open a bank account for this IRA LLC, this type of LLC. It's a business checking account, right? We transfer, we roll over their IRA, it buys an LLC, and then they can invest in different things. Well, they have to often, the last step is go open up a bank account for this company, for this limited liability company. And Jim, opening a bank account today is unbelievably difficult. The bankers are trained forwards, backwards, left, and right to believe that everyone is a money launderer or a terrorist. I've actually been through some of these anti-money laundering trainings. I've spoken with the trainers and the managers, and Jim, they are the most insane, brainwashed group of people. They believe that if you're starting an LLC, you're probably committing tax fraud and trying to, it's unfreaking believable. Like, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's not just the United States. I opened a bank account a year ago here, and there were about 7 forms. I said, what's all this for? You taking your instructions for applications straight from Washington? I said it in my best Spanish. And the guy just looked at me, 5-second pause, smiled, and said, yeah.
Yeah. The banking system is such a joke, and maybe that's a good caveat or a good segue, I should say, into the inevitable breakdown of the U.S. banking system. The energy sector, the losses in the energy sector that you've covered extensively, some of these massive write-downs that we should have seen here in March and April, have they just been papered over?
I think many of them have been disclosed and written down, but at the same time, many have not. Remember, the Dallas Fed had an informal meeting, and they were quite angry that the subject of the meeting was leaked out. And what happened was that the Dallas Fed told the banks of Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, don't exactly forgive the debt, but don't mark it to market yet, and work with the companies, because you have covenant violations and they're just late, they're in default.
Right.
But work with the companies to try to get some satisfaction through asset sales, and that didn't work either. They're not getting even 70, 60 cents on the dollar for the assets. By asset, I mean like a drilling rig or trucks or whatever. There's a surplus of that. So you're seeing lots of evidence of extreme measures being taken whereby the banking sector is just trying to buy time. And they're not seeing the oil price go back up. I mean, sure, it's gone back to 40. I don't know exactly what it is now, but I said back in the March report that it would come up toward 40 and go right back down. Maybe not down to test the lows, but go back down and find 40 to be a resistant wall. And that happened. I don't know what the oil price is right now. Can you bring that up quickly?
Yeah, I was looking this morning. I want to say it was in the mid 40s. Yeah, 45.58.
Okay, so it's gone back above 40 consistently. There are so many factors that right now could do a tremendous amount of damage to the banks in a final blow. You mentioned the energy sector, and that's very real, because the energy firms can no longer live off the oil hedges. The hedges have expired. And a hedge, for instance, a year ago would allow, let's just say Baker Hughes. A year ago, Baker Hughes would put on a hedge so that they could essentially benefit from a sale of oil, continued sale of oil, at maybe $90 or $85. Well, that hedge is gone. So they sold forward by means of oil futures contracts.
It's like an insurance contract, right?
Well, no, it's more than that. It's a contract they deliver on.
Right.
So if they weren't to deliver on it, yeah, they could benefit and buy back at a much lower price and enjoy a profit. But they deliver on it. So the big oil companies have hedges that are actually commercial and not bets. Okay? They deliver into them. Well, once those contracts expire and they're done with them, they go to a new round, and maybe they have others that they hedge where they were selling at 55 for a while.
Right.
But now they're going to have to deal with the reality of the market. Okay, the energy sector, it's not just that, it's gas too. The energy sector is a very big risk, and it's a present day risk. But there are other big risks to the banks right now, and I believe the interest rate derivatives and other derivatives, they're whacking the banks in ways that we just don't see. Their derivatives are bouncing around. Just think of waves hitting a dock. Okay, you've got some nice artwork or some pottery on the dock, and it's getting knocked over by some waves. That's kind of the damage that you're seeing from the derivatives. Just movement up and down, like with waves, is hitting the bank sector because they can't quite manage things like they used to. In December, this is a key point regarding the leverage and the risk from the waves damage. Just the simple oscillation in the markets. In December, there was supposedly an interest rate hike, and maybe there was. I thought for a while that there was not, because the effective Fed funds rate was only up 8 or 12 basis points when we were told it was a 25 basis hike. But now it looks like they did a rate hike. But what happened was they accelerated the reverse repo, which means the Fed took cash from the Wall Street banks and the major banks and gave them treasuries with a specific purpose to use the treasuries as instruments to leverage up, way up. So the interest rate hike from December of last year was not so much to bring about normalcy in the monetary policy regarding interest rates. The rate hike was to force the banks to increase their leverage, force the banks to shed their cash, bring in more treasuries, lever up and balance out the effect of all the artificial interest rate swap derivative demand for treasuries. There's almost no demand internationally for treasury bonds anymore. Mm-hmm. Yet there's ample demand within the market. Mm-hmm. It's coming from the derivatives. Mm-hmm. You're having China divest $250 billion in July, August, and September last year of treasury bonds. But the interest rate did not go up. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because the interest rate swap machinery is producing artificial demand. Okay, the point that I'm bringing back to the banks here, I mean, got off to the tangent there, but for a reason. The big banks are now super leveraged with respect to the treasury bonds. So any oscillations, any volatility that you see in either the stock market or the bond market severely whacks the big banks because derivatives cannot handle movement. Mm-hmm. And the analogy I like to give is, imagine a Sears Tower. You can't talk about World Trade anymore because they demolished that. The Wall Street bankers demolished that, along with military and security agency assistant. They demolished the World Trade Center. If I were at the 120-story Sears building in Chicago, and suddenly it's 180 stories, and it's a little narrower. Why is it narrower? Because the big banks are even more leveraged with a smaller base of treasuries. Mm-hmm. Like the Sears Tower would be even more leveraged for its height by a narrower base and footprint. Mm-hmm. So if you have 180 stories as opposed to 120, and the Sears Tower is now with a smaller base, is it not more vulnerable to the winds? Okay, absolutely. The answer is obviously yes, and that's what's going on with the banking system. Mm-hmm. I believe that the banking system in 2008 and 9 went completely insolvent. And now I believe that primarily due to the energy sector losses and with increased losses through volatility, etc., with the derivatives, the big banks are facing illiquidity problems. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the Fed is coming in and saying, we're not going to be your last resort for bailing you out anymore. Mm-hmm. And it got confirmed in some recent FDIC reports directed at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Since when does a U.S. government quasi-agency like FDIC issue a report to JP Morgan telling them that they're over-leveraged and cannot handle another financial crisis?
Right.
No. We're in a new chapter here. And I think the Chinese have told the U.S., get rid of your too-big-to-fail bank policy. Yeah. Get rid of it. Let them squirm in the wind.
Yeah.
So the Fed is saying, okay, they can squirm in the wind, but we're going to increase the leverage. In other words, we're going to reduce the base of the Sears Tower as it gets taller.
Right.
Okay, this is all very dangerous stuff, and I think we're going to see a bank failure, and I think it's going to be an extension of Deutsche Bank action in Europe or JP Morgan action in the United States. I don't think any trigger is going to come from Canada. They're too much a tail on the U.S. dog.
It does appear to be a setup. I mean, a massive orchestration to let these banks implode.
Furthermore, we're about to get a repeat of the Lehman event. Mm-hmm. If you look at all the different metrics, all the different data summaries, you see we're at worse leverage, we're at worse debt, we're at worse insolvency, we're at lower economic activity, which means that we can support less debt through legitimate activity. Can't service the debt, smaller economic base. Mm-hmm. We're worse off than we were at Lehman in 2008. We haven't fixed anything. We had no attempt to fix anything. We've had obstacles for all reform. We've kept all the big banks going, and they're now even more casinos and even less commercial credit, or investment banking in their function. We're moving toward, well, a systemic Lehman moment. They've spread around all their major derivative risk to several of the big banks so that if anyone is in trouble, they all kind of struggle and lean a bit into the wind and help out, say, Societe Generale in France. Mm-hmm. But now you got Wells Fargo announcing they've got multiple billions of energy loans that are suspect, and Wells Fargo has been violating the Fed's little, advice, suggestion. Mm-hmm. Wells Fargo is not going along with this movement of, don't mark to market, let's give them more time. Wells Fargo is saying, no, we got a big portfolio that's in trouble.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, Wells Fargo is probably the biggest of the, how should I call it? The banks that Chinese do business with.
Okay.
So if they're going to continue to do a lot of business with Wells Fargo, they might force it not to play along so much with the Fed and the crooked guys in New York.
Interesting.
Wells Fargo is unique. Wells Fargo has another uniqueness in that the Chinese have used Wells Fargo to deposit multiple billions of dollars in treasury bonds, and with that high quality collateral have borrowed tenfold against it.
Huh.
And with that, they're buying commercial properties all across the United States for multiple billions, and the U.S. government does not like it.
That's really interesting. They're using treasuries as collateral.
So you think that the Fed and maybe the Department of Treasury can come in and say, wait a minute, Wells Fargo, we don't want you to do that because you don't have adequate capital. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, they're treasury bonds. The collateral's just fine. But it's third world debt by any other measure. Mm-hmm. All right, we got a systemic Lehman moment coming, and I think we're going to see something this year.
Jim, do you think
if you have the ring of fire across the entire American hemisphere, going from all the way Chile through the Andes of Ecuador just had a giant earthquake. Mm-hmm. Mexico, San Andreas, all the way up through California. If you have the ring of fire doing earthquakes, I think you're going to have a dollar ring of fire with other earthquakes in the Western banking system, and I think it's going to come this year.
That's a good analogy. Do you think it's going to be one? You think we're going to see a headline that's going to have one bank's name on it, or do you think it's going to have several?
I think initially it'll be one, and in the article for the announcement on the one bank, let's just say, for instance, HSBC goes down in London because of problems that are forced to the table regarding their gold market rigging, which has come out from the Deutsche Bank revelations. Right. Okay, HSBC has an announcement of a failure in progress, imminent, call for aid, etc. And in the third paragraph, it mentions 3 other banks that might fall within a few weeks.
Yeah.
Like a big Italian bank, like maybe Societe Generale of France.
Right.
Like RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland and England. Mm-hmm. Okay, those are 3. I mean, just what the biggest bank in Italy in trouble? I think it's Monte Paschi. Okay, so Paschi in Italy, Societe Generale in France, RBS in England. Bang, bang, bang. So it won't just be HSBC or whatever. HSBC is one of the most vulnerable right now. I'm hearing RBS is just days away from failure. So maybe it'll be RBS, and in the fallout, HSBC gets hit. Don't know. I don't know. The banks don't usually give us their executive summary reports on what to expect next month and what to work hard in overnight to fix, usually with some narcotics money. They don't give us those reports. Mm-hmm. We're left to just rely on our own sources and our own information, and I do the best I can, and I'm pretty fortunate. I remember, gosh, like it was yesterday that I got an anonymous phone call from a fellow with a European accent, and it was The Voice. It was April of '08. And it kind of took me off balance for a while, Will. To be honest, I didn't know whether it was a death threat.
Yeah.
And it took 2 or 3 calls, each one half an hour, before I realized, no, this guy's on the good team. He's got a white hat on.
Right.
And he made me some offers that I couldn't refuse. Like, for instance, he said, I'll help supply you with some information that's very consistent with the analysis that you're already doing. He said, you're one of the 5 English-speaking analysts who actually see the destruction and the collapse and the catastrophe coming.
Right.
There aren't many of you around in the English-speaking world. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, fine, but what do you want? And he said, well, I want you to be a megaphone. Mm-hmm. I want to supply you with information that's valid, and you'll be a little early. And I'll give you some of my own forecasts, and you'll be criticized that they don't happen fast enough. They might take 2 years to happen. Like he told me in 2014, Germany's going to flip east. Mm-hmm. How's that working out? It's taking a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in development for sure.
It's in development. He told me back in 2011 the petrodollar is going to die, the Saudi regime will fall. Mm-hmm. He said it's going to be a long, slow process, but you watch. So anyway, The Voice came on board, and I already had a small team. I didn't regard it as a team of colleagues. I just had this one fellow who was a mining expert and a petroleum expert. I had another fellow who was a friend of mine in the San Jose area, who was an engineer with a lot of good contacts, and he turned me on to a friend of his who was an ex-Comex facilitator in Chicago. And then I invited Euroraj, who was a London banker. And then I invited London Paul, who was an ex-London banker. And now I've invited another fellow who's an inventor and an engineer, very smart fellow. So we bring in a lot of different opinions and perspectives. And I forgot, Rob Kirby was a friend of mine from way back. I knew Rob Kirby before The Voice was a friend of mine, contact of mine. So the team just grew, and now it's 10 or 11 people. We're all men, and it's not designed that way. It just turned out that way. And about half of them are Americans. So we have an interesting time. There's also in there the original group before The Voice, pre-Voice colleague is a fellow who's living in Latin America now, but he used to be a U.S.-based mortgage bond expert and underwriter. Mm-hmm. Brilliant fellow who he's a great news hound. I get up in the morning and Kevin's got 6 or 8 messages, and 2 or 3 are really interesting, and 1 or 2 are, on the sidelines interesting. So that's how I built the group, Will.
Yeah,
it started with good analysis and correct forecasts. The Voice came on, and then some others started just sending me things saying, what do you think about this? Mm-hmm. How does this fit in with some of your other perspectives and forecasts and analyses? And I said, well, you've been really helpful for the last year. Would you like to join our group?
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess so, yeah. What does that mean? Nothing. You just contribute.
Right.
And that's my colleague group.
I like that you've used the analogy of a switchboard before, in that not so much your group there, but the pings, whether it's from somebody like me or whether it's from a hat-trick letter client who, in his or her specific industry sees something that is of interest to you. You get a lot of emails. You get a lot of information from the field. From us, I get some from clients and people out there. I can't imagine what your desk looks like. So that's a switchboard of information and of data for you to use and to draw from. And sometimes you forward some of that data over to people like me, And it's real interesting snippets.
Oh, the switchboard has been loaded with information.
Mm-hmm.
The switchboard includes clients, but it also includes what I call the followers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not paying clients, but they use contact us, send me an email, and after a while, they start just going directly to me and not using my contact us window.
Mm-hmm.
But let me just tell you three stories. I got a story back in 2006 or so from a woman, and she said, we just had a dinner with some of our old college women buddies. There are about 5 of us who like to get together. We keep in touch. And one of them, Susie, went off to the ladies' room, didn't come back quickly. So a couple of us went in to find out if she fell in or whatever, and we found her crying. Susie was an air traffic controller out of the Dulles Airport in Washington. And she just had to sign. They took a lot to get it out of her, but they told this client of mine, paying client of mine, told me that Susie got a visit that week from the CIA to sign a loyalty oath to the effect that she would not reveal that the U.S. Air Force shot down the Shanksville plane in Pennsylvania. They shot it down. It wasn't terrorists pulling down the pilot. And, no. A wing part was found 5 miles from the crash site. Okay, that was one. Another woman in Hawaii told me a story that her father was part of Army intelligence before the Pearl Harbor attack and got wind of information that was passed on to the Japanese, inviting them to attack Pearl Harbor. And he was chased down, the father was chased down for 5 years in Hawaii until they finally just said, don't worry about it. It's all in the past now. And the key element regarding the Pearl Harbor attack, evidence perhaps that it was an invited attack by Roosevelt, was that the Japanese were told, do not hit the fuel depot. Since when do you attack a naval port and not hit the fuel depot? Well, could you explain that?
I could not. And that did in fact happen?
Yeah, they did not hit the fuel depot.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the more recent ones that I got was a woman named Nikki. She always apologized in Italy for her less than perfect English, but she communicated just fine with me. She said, Jim, in Italy, there's a lot of talk in the newspapers and on the radio shows and among ourselves. These are not Syrians. They're from all over North Africa. They're black Moroccans. Mm-hmm. They're from Tunisia. They're from Libya. This is a major dumping exercise having nothing to do with the Syrian war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, European media is not calling the people. They're not Syrians. They're calling them North Africans. I mean, the media in Europe.
The media is.
Yeah, I mean,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought they were calling them Syrian refugees.
Well, maybe there are some parts of the media that are.
They're also calling them African or Muslim refugees.
Yeah, like the warning.
At first, Will, they were Syrian refugees.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so I get a lot of sourced information from, I don't like to use the word plebeian in a negative way, but these common folks sending me stuff like today. Mm-hmm. I got in the contact us window that story about how the Venezuelans need to dilute their heavy Orinoco oil mm-hmm. with Nigerian oil, and they don't have the cash, so their exports are really way down. Okay, that came from a contact us. I mean, it was some guy in England. I know it was England. He didn't really say it, but his email address had UK at the end, mm-hmm. so that's England. Yep. I'm very grateful to the people who send me information. I encourage it, but I also get some hate mail, and I would like to say that it does not get me down. The level of hate mail is down way over 90% compared to, say, 6 months ago.
Really?
because it's looking like the dollar is having some major problems.
Yeah, I guess it's getting real. It's getting obvious on a grand scale for other for those that aren't really paying attention.
There's nothing like correct forecasts to discourage hate mail.
Right.
Oh, Jim, you don't know anything. Your forecasts are all full of crap.
Please stay tuned for part 2. Check back in with us here at this same page, and part 2 will be listed shortly. Thanks for joining us.
The level of hate mail is down way over 90% compared to, say, 6 months ago.
Really?
Because it's looking like the dollar is having some major problems.
Yeah, I guess it's getting real. It's getting obvious on a grand scale for other for those that aren't really paying attention.
There's nothing like correct forecasts to discourage hate mail.
Right.
Oh, Jim, you don't know anything. Your forecasts are all full of crap. Oh, really? Okay. Well, would you like to see a list of 30 correct ones?
Jim, are you concerned about censorship? This is off topic a little bit, but one of your emails that just came out the other day was your interview on another show where 15 minutes into the show he had to cut it off, saying that Google was limiting that particular YouTube station or channel to 15 minutes per day. What are your thoughts on that kind of stuff starting to happen?
Oh, I think it's bound to happen. I'm surprised that it hasn't happened more, Will, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, when Senator Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia retired, what was that, about 2010 or 2011, right around there, I celebrated. Mm-hmm. Okay, a Satanist is stepping to the side. What was his pet project? Censorship and control of the internet. So he's gone.
Interesting.
A major senator advocating censorship is gone. So that was progress. Mm-hmm. They're going to try as much as they can to limit, but the internet is a fascinating medium. Mm-hmm. I had a buddy, and I just can't think of his name. I met him in the conference in 2008 in Vancouver, and we shared a radio show. Gosh, I can't even think of the name of the show. This was back in 2010. We called it Jim Willie's Corner, and Rob Kirby did some, and this fellow from San Diego who has a law degree focusing on the constitutional aspects of gold. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, Jim, I've made myself a bit of an expert in computer networking. I don't mean like emails. I mean like computer networking, bridges and routers and, mm-hmm. and hubs and all kinds of things regarding the network technology. And he said, a fascinating fact keeps us safe, that it takes a while for the Congress to come up, through its agencies, to come up with laws to limit internet activity. Mm-hmm. And by the time they enact the law, what they try to cover is obsolete technology.
Right, right.
You got to laugh.
That's beautiful. That's
if just it takes 18 to 36 months for them to get legislation on a concept, by the time 2 years passes, the concept is a bit old. And then he explained to me something fascinating. He said, you know how you see a rotary and all the cars are in motion. I'm looking at a rotary right now. Everything is in motion. It's rather efficient. Mm-hmm. A car will wait until there's an opening, and then the car will move. A truck will come through, and people in their cars stand aside. And the big bus I'm looking at a bus come through. Another car is yielding to the bus. Okay, everything's in motion. Mm-hmm. Okay, back in 2006 or 7 or 8, this expert friend of mine said to me that the internet traffic flow realized recently a 15 to 20% throughput gain by installing rotaries in the networks where there were traffic jams. I don't even know exactly what that means, but I don't have to. What it means was, in a practical sense, was that the bits kept moving for the messages and for the downloaded pages. Mm-hmm. Everything kept moving and nothing stopped. Mm-hmm. And they realized a 15 to 20% output, movement advantage,
right.
throughput they call it. Well, that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
The progress doesn't stop. The Congress is much slower than technological development. I'm not worried a twit.
Yeah. Good. That's good.
About the censorship, but this is going to sound funny, but I should. I should, for a simple reason, that they might do something really nasty.
Right.
And
well, the basis,
I don't know exactly what it might be.
Well, to your point, Jim, the basis of the technology, of the open source technology of the internet, it's like you can't shut the whole thing down without it becoming evident to the entire society as a whole. Hey, we've just put a plug on the internet, like maybe something they do in China. I don't know, as far as limiting media. But you can't.
But there's a lot they can do to help their own cause. They can blame the internet for a lot of problems that brought down the electricity grid.
Sure.
They can make it seem like they're doing something beneficial. Mm-hmm. And, it's all very vile. I'm concerned that there might come a day when any newsletter or any website that focuses on the dollar or the banking system or anything general to do with financial fraud and breakdown gets shut down.
Right. Well, that would be, that would be a huge, it'd be a lot of websites to shut down. It'd be a lot of data to stop flowing. And, who's to say these sites aren't just going to flip a switch and have their server in, Belize go active the next day?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The first thing that it'll go to Canada. Mm-hmm. Then it'll go the Caribbean, and then it'll go some Latin American source or someplace like, say, Latvia.
Well, and a lot of us are already using those offshore server and resources. I mean, I know that sites like Zero Hedge, a massive, huge traffic, it's got to have attacks. It's got to have multiple attacks on a regular basis. They are taking incredible precautions to protect the database, the information.
Well, in the name or in the pursuit of efficiency, Will, I believe that many of these web hosts are doing things like that.
Right.
I mean, let's suppose someone from Rome, Italy, and someone from Dusseldorf, Germany, does a request for a public article of mine. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't go straight to Toronto. They've got a satellite for that Toronto website. A satellite, say, in Paris, another satellite in Zurich. So the Rome and the Dusseldorf requests will be satisfied from the satellite in Zurich.
Right.
It's already it's ready. It's like, okay, they're downloading the content overnight.
Right. At that point,
terabits.
At that point, we're not even dealing with sovereignty. We're doing offshore, rigs that are storing all this stuff.
If they offshore labor for, say, building a cell phone or building a computer or component to a computer, they're going to offshore the website function also.
Right.
It's good business. It's lower cost. Mm-hmm. In Costa Rica, for example, they have massive call centers. And sometimes, I learned this from a really smart, connected buddy of mine. He said, did you notice that at 10 o'clock you have much slower response time on your internet? Did you notice sometimes that the breakdowns happen where you just send a Gmail message and, whoops, it didn't get delivered, but you try 20 minutes later and everything's fine again? He said, that's when the call centers come on. And they use up bandwidth. But the system adapts and they offload to other, not offshore, but suburban hosts, suppliers for the internet and all the traffic. Very interesting. So call centers here are cheap. And I know a couple of people. I know one woman who said to me, Jim, my English is not really good, but I'm taking more lessons. And I think in about a year, I'll be able to do full-time and not just part-time work at the call center. Mm-hmm. I said, well, that's great. That's great. So I helped her practice her English.
I have to wonder what. Back to your story about Jeannie or the friend of the at the dinner who was approached by the CIA to sign the disclosure agreement or whatever about the Pennsylvania plane in 9/11 being shot down. I have to wonder about that particular individual, Jeannie, let's call her. There've got to be other Jeannies out there, Jim, all over the place. And
I'm afraid Jeannie might get leukemia in the next couple of years, die away, and you won't hear about her anymore.
Yeah, well, we know that's happened. I mean, we know.
What my question was, what was the threat?
Mm-hmm.
What was the actual threat?
Did she answer?
Yeah.
Do you care to
disclose?
disclose?
Get put on the no-fly list.
Uh-huh.
You lose your Social Security.
Mm-hmm. You
lose your passport.
This is if she just declined to sign the agreement.
Right.
Wow.
And no hire anywhere in the federal government. Mm-hmm. No reference for past work.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you become a labor market non-entity.
Yeah. Wow. Your whole career, basically, down the toilet.
Yeah. And it's very hard to start up a second identity mm-hmm. and begin a second career. Mm-hmm. And it's not even possible so quickly to, say, move to Mexico or move to Chile and start again.
Right. So people like Jeannie are either hushed into submission or encouraged to become a part of the the crime syndicate,
What she does is she signs and tells all her friends. Mm-hmm. And the grapevine goes wild.
Yep.
That's the reality. That's how Susie continues.
Right.
Jeannie, Susie, whatever.
Right.
That's how they continue within the system, because just like Langley, she's got plausible deniability.
Right.
Oh, I didn't say anything. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Those people, they're just making wild-ass guesses. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of Susies and Jeannies out there.
Yeah.
I've got numerous stories like that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's all part of the switchboard, and it's fun. I enjoy that aspect of this work. But I do get some pretty weird stuff. And like just today, I got a message from a guy and said, Jim, I don't really think there's any evil in the world. I don't think there's any evil, and I don't think there are any Satanists either. I think that's all exaggerated. I said, okay, well, let me say this. It's one of the dumbest messages I've received in 3 or 4 months. And how about if you do me a favor, don't bother to write me anymore.
Yeah, denying the presence of this evil is, it's impossible. Maybe
no, it's possible. It's just stupid.
That's fair. Sure, that's
now, maybe
fair.
they lived in a closet all their lives, and
I can understand the argument. Are people born evil? What is it? The Locke's Hobb debate. Are people born?
Oh, I think some people are born evil. I call it a bad seed.
Yeah, I think so too.
I know some people who are a bad seed. They had good parents. Yeah. They're a bad seed. They're just, I don't know what's wrong with them.
Right.
They don't do anything right. They love to hurt people. Their parents are good and they were raised well. Mm-hmm. What's that all about? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's not my job, Will. Not my job to figure it out.
Yep.
But I've had some personal experiences with evil. Mm-hmm. And I've had one friend in particular, the object of an evil curse.
Really?
Yeah. A satanic curse. And it affected this friend directly as the curse was delivered. Mm-hmm. And here's where it gets incredibly weird. A priest from Florida, a friend of the family, came to visit this friend of mine and was not told by the aunt any details. Mm-hmm. And the priest came, and as soon as he met my friend, he said, I have to say something. He was an expert in demonism. And that's why the aunt asked that he stop by, because he was coming to Costa Rica and fluent in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And he said to my friend, I'm sorry, I have to say something. I'm sensing something extremely evil. Mm-hmm. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, I don't mean to insult you in any way. I'm sorry to say this, but I believe there has been a very powerful spell placed upon you. Mm-hmm. My friend had a recovery in the next month. It was remarkable. Okay, these are some of the odd experiences. Okay, there's evil in this world. Mm-hmm. Anyone who, oh gosh, I had a client say to me, I know someone who actually shook Hillary Clinton's hand in the last several months, and he walked away visibly affected.
Really? Wow. Well,
she's a massive Satanist.
I can look at pictures of some of these people, Jim, and it makes my skin crawl. I get a visceral, gnarly experience. I can't imagine looking them in the eyes and shaking their hand.
Yeah. Well, this person who sent me a message, it might have been through the Contact Us again. It's a remarkable window, and it's funny how the Contact Us even came into being. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about changing a payment processor because of new U.S. government restrictions and rules, and a lot of weird crap that Obama has been doing.
Right.
And I looked into an offshore payment processor like in Cyprus. I quickly changed my plan. No, I don't think Cyprus looks all that good anymore. But they had other branches, one in India and one in Latvia. And I thought, Latvia might be independent, but gosh, they seem to be more U.S. tools than the rest of Europe. Mm-hmm. I think because they're so small, they're more easily controlled. So in the process of applying with a certain Indian fellow, he said to me, you don't meet our requirements. And I said, well, what am I lacking? And he said, well, for one, Contact Us. And he mentioned a couple other things, but Contact Us. You need to have better customer support. Mm. I said, okay, that's actually a good idea. I had it up and running in under a week. Mm-hmm. My website manager put it in. Then I realized this is really handy.
Yeah.
But it also has an extremely handy cancellation feature. One of the options is difficulty in logging on. Another one is cancellation. Another one is shared item of interest, like an article. Mm-hmm. And then there are a few others. I can't remember them all. It's very helpful. I'm so happy I put in the Contact Us, and I never really changed my payment processor.
Well, good. I mean, it's interesting how these little things come about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an evolution just from, examining alternatives and realizing from the examination, you get a little shortcoming here. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's fine. There have been other little improvements that have come about. But, the banking system is going to have some shockwaves. I believe, honestly, I believe very, very firmly. When the new dollar comes about, we have extreme high risk of two things happening. An instant devaluation of the new dollar and bail-ins. Mm-hmm. And the bail-in might be to cover the devaluation.
Right.
We have, a 30% devaluation of the new dollar instantly, and they make it evident by having your bank accounts and your stock accounts 30% reduced. Mm-hmm. And you go in and say, well, wait a minute, what'd you do? You just stole almost a third of all my stocks, my whole portfolio. You stole a third of my CDs. You stole a third of my savings account. And they can say, well, it's all interwoven with the devaluation. Sorry about that.
Those damn Chinese.
It was the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians who did it.
Yep.
Anytime you hear hacking, I honestly, it's remarkable how many clients of mine say I have to change the credit card tied in for the billing because my renewal's coming up in May. I had some fraud from a hacking incident.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No, Jim, if you take, very well, if you take recurring credit card payments from people, whether it's the new RFID chip that they're putting in credit cards or whether it's identity theft or whether it's security breaches, you're getting a new credit card like all the time, where they cancel your old one and they send you a new one. And if you're, like me, it stinks because all your stuff is on the one card. So I got to call the gas company. Anyway.
Yeah, well, there's more to it than just what you say. There's a sinister side to it.
Sure.
The banks have too much credit card debt, and they're taking losses. So they're trying to limit the amount of debt that it gets extended.
Sure.
And one way they do that is by telling you that their fraud department has detected some unusual activity. Mm-hmm. And you've got a new credit card. Ask them what the unusual activity is, and you get a blank.
Right.
So they don't have to answer you because they're running their bank as they see fit. Mm-hmm. And I believe their motive is to limit the extended credit on their credit card lines because they're in deep, deep trouble with the economy. I've got a best friend from Boston. He was among my first 5 clients. He said, "Jim, so you finally launched, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got 3 clients so far." He said, "Well, I'll be your 4th. I'm going to sign up right now." So while we were on the phone, he signed up, and there it was. I've offered him many, many times, "I'm going to cancel your billing, John." He said, "What for? You stopped working?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Then you need to get paid." But he told me he had 6 replacements to his credit card in a 2-year period.
Wow.
And he said, I asked them, "What is the fraudulent activity?" And they said, "Well, there was a charge from Egypt that we reversed." And he said, "Well, if there was a charge in Egypt, then how come I never saw it?" He said, "Well, it was between your billing statements." They can say anything they want, Will.
Right. And if there was a charge in Egypt, why was there a need to issue a new number altogether if the card itself wasn't?
No, that's a good reason. There's a charge that was improper. Now you change everything.
You change the card number, yeah, even though the card was never in Egypt.
I had a 2005 fraud event from online poker out of Egypt. Mm-hmm. $500 in 2005. So I naturally changed the credit card. I said, "Well, let's get rid of the credit card. Can you issue me a new one?" I was the one who asked for that. They called me up and said, "Look, we've got a potential suspicious charge here. Have you been doing online poker out of an Egypt site?" And I said, "Hell no." Okay, then I started wondering, why did that happen when it did? Mm-hmm. And I know why. I signed up for Match.com to find the woman of my dreams.
Yeah.
And in 2 weeks, I had the fraudulent event.
Little did you know that you'd be gambling in Egypt.
Yeah, well, you're a funny man. So I dumped the Match. I actually got a refund on Match.com. I didn't bother with a thing. And now I'm just overwhelmed in love in Costa Rica. I'm in love.
Jim,
I got 3 sweethearts here, and I love them all dearly.
As you should.
Sweet, sweet girls.
Well,
they're young women. They're sweet women with lives.
Well, Jim, despite your disgust for the global economy and the criminality in charge, you are a man who is just full of love. So God bless you there. Hey, buddy, in closing, if we could, how do you see all this unfolding for our friends in the U.S.? I know this year, I mean, we don't have to talk time frames per se, but do you see things getting real ugly real fast, or do you think that some of our friends that are paying attention are going to have time to get the hell out of Dodge? Are they going to need to? I mean, what are your thoughts on the unfolding?
I don't think people are going to get out of town quickly enough. I think they're trapped.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of people, and I communicate, rather, with a lot of people, and the common response I get is, "What would I do for income? My kids are in school. They have friends. Mm-hmm. I have a business here. What would I do for income?" And I don't have a good answer for them. I say, if you cannot transfer your business to be online, and I only know 1 or 2 who've done that. What they've done is they moved their engineering services mm-hmm. online, and they travel, but they have a different base. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy. Okay, the breakdown is in progress. And what I'm seeing right now is that the major fault lines are in the Treasury bond market and the banking system. And the irony is really choking, ironic, that QE never fixed anything. QE guaranteed the financial breakdown.
Kept the people asleep longer, too.
Well, let's look at why. So the Fed comes in and says, we'll be the buyer of U.S. government debt, and we'll be the buyer of redeemed Wall Street held government debt. In other words, future issuance and past issuance. They'll cover the upcoming deficits for the government that are made into Treasury bonds. They'll cover that. But they'll also cover the 2-year, 5-year, 6-year-old Treasury bonds that Wall Street owns. So what's the result of that? A lot of legitimate buyers said, we don't need to buy anymore. A lot of legitimate investors said, let's get rid of ours. If the government's going to be buying it, then let's just get rid of ours and we can do something useful with our money. You know, like invest in a business. Okay, so the Fed destroyed the bond market by discouraging active new investors. Wow, that is huge, ironic. What were some of the other effects? Well, you have to look at the 0%. It distorted all the financial markets. It encouraged the emerging market nations to borrow a lot of dollars, and now they're going to default. So the boomerang is that the big U.S. and London and Western European banks are on the hook for between $6 and $9 trillion of bad U.S. dollar debt issued since Lehman. And why has it gone bad? Well, their currencies have fallen. They were told you got no risk here with this near 0% loan to, say, Bangladesh. What about the currency risk?
Right.
So their currency's down 20 and 30 and 40%, and now their loan's up 20 and 30 and 40%. And they're going to default on it because not only that, but the export business is damaged. They're not exporting oil like they used to, or copper and aluminum and other minerals. So the whole commodity structure for their income stream is down. Okay, well, why is it between $6 and $9 trillion for emerging market debt? Well, basically because how do you define an emerging market country?
Right.
I don't know what the list of countries is, but their debt is very well known. They're going to start defaulting. Are they going to do another central bank agreement not to mark to the market on the emerging market debt? Hell no, because they're not American.
Right.
They're going to try to go in there and steal, seize, confiscate their assets. So in that sense, 0% not only brought about destruction of the global economy, but it provided an opportunity for the Western bankers to seize assets like we've seen the demonstration in Greece. Oh, I tell you, it's so broken. You're asking me what should people do? What can people do? They need to bail out of their bank accounts before they're bailed in. They need to bail out of their stock accounts because doesn't it make a lot of sense to sell out to the Fed and Wall Street who are propping up the stock market? Sell it to them and buy what they've been suppressing in price, namely gold and silver. Makes perfect sense. Or, no, I'm sorry, the dumbasses out there would much rather buy what's already high because it's going to go higher. No, the public usually makes the wrong decisions. I'm telling you what the right decision is. You sell your stocks and your bank account CDs and you buy gold and silver because silver's going to rise tenfold. Silver's going to go almost to 200 with relative ease. They're going to have to bring about an equilibrium in supply and demand. What a novel concept!
Shouldn't the market do that, Jim?
Yeah, well, there is no market, and that's why the Chinese are going to take it away and take control and impose new measures for gold and silver that allow its price to rise, and it's going to break a lot of Western banks. I'm hearing that there are a lot of deals in the works right now for the Western nations to abide by a global pact where the dollar will be replaced by a table of gold-backed currencies. Like the one that we hear about the most is the gold-backed RMB, the Chinese currency, the yuan. Okay, that's not going to be the only one. The Russians own maybe as much gold as the Chinese. Both the Russians and the Chinese, they each own 25 to 30,000 tons of gold. They're each ready, willing, and able to create a gold currency. They're not going to be the only ones. The Swiss are going to come up with a gold currency because they have a lot of gold also. It could be leased directly from the Bank for International Settlements in Basel. There are more nations that are going to have precious metal backing. Look for Mexico to have a silver-backed peso. Look for Panama to have a gold and copper-backed currency. Okay, the pact among the community of nations at this big table that I'm hearing about, I've got some contacts. Again, it was through the contact us. He said, Jim, we've been involved with the global collateral accounts. We need to talk to you about some of the developments. And I'm wondering, is this a bunch of poppycock or what? So I had a bunch of questions that I asked them. And we're going to talk again. But the pact of what has been negotiated, not completely yet. Not completely. It's still, the U.S. is obstructing everything. They're trying to murder people.
Clearly, they're
The
spraying.
U.S. Treasury Department is trying to murder people involved with the negotiations.
Unbelievable.
But the pact it calls for a $10,000 gold price and a $250 silver price.
Jim, in the interest, let's say, of this pact, or the Chinese for that matter, is there interest in a freely traded gold and silver price or in a fixed, much higher gold and silver price that's still fixed or controlled in some measure?
I think the initial steps are to force quantum jumps up.
Gotcha.
And that will open the gold mines again.
Thereby allowing
a free new
price.
supply in.
Right.
It'll also free up some supply from owners who say, well, we get to $2,500 gold or $3,000 gold. I'm going to sell 10% of my holdings because I got a lot of things that have been waiting.
Yeah,
I got kids who I want to send to college, or I want to expand my business, but I can't.
Right.
Not yet.
Right.
So the first few steps are going to be forced quantum jumps up. To get the mines open, to get the market working more properly. And then I think later they're going to have some real efforts to allow full freedom in the market to try to achieve short-term and long-term equilibrium between supply and demand. There's going to be some forcible movement from international contract to get to 8,000 to 12,000 on the gold price, and look for the ratio of gold and silver to move down to 30 and 40 into something more reasonable.
Right.
It's totally out of whack right now. You've got over 300 ounces of claims for every physical ounce of gold from paper contracts. 300 to 1 right now.
Wow.
It's absolutely absurd, untenable, and will not continue. So at first come the quantum jumps. Then we're going to have a lot of movement toward equilibrium. We have to test to see what comes out of existing hoards. Like, some guy who owns maybe 4,000 ounces of gold. How much is he going to sell if we get to 3,000? We don't know those answers yet.
Right.
You need the system to work its magic to achieve an equilibrium. But Jim Sinclair has done some excellent work looking at new dollar creation, new debt extension, and he says the fair price for gold has to be somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000 per ounce. So I think that's where we're moving. I think the 10,000 is the lower bound in that range. It's very easily defended. But when we get the gold currencies, Will, that's when the banking system starts getting involved in the game.
Right.
The banking system, I believe, is secretly acquiring gold now.
The Western financial banking system?
Yes. And when they're ready, they're going to give a signal, and the Chinese are going to say to them, okay, we see your signal. We're going to double the gold and silver price in the next month. And who's going to be a beneficiary of that? The banks that bought.
Sure.
And that's one of the main ways that the banks are going to recapitalize themselves in the West. They're all absolutely in tatters right now.
Isn't that ironic, Jim? They're going to recapitalize themselves with their own Achilles heel.
Yeah, but they're going to lie through their teeth while they're doing it.
Of course they are. Yeah.
They're not going to want you to bid up the price of what they're resupplying at.
Right.
The irony is all over the place. So they're going to lie to you that gold is still a dead asset while they're buying.
Yep.
Now, we mentioned how the silver market is seeing a lot of accumulation right now. It could be not just China, but it could be some of the Western banks, because they don't own much silver. They own a lot of gold.
Yeah.
The central banks own gold. They own no silver. Industry requires almost no gold.
Right.
Industry requires a lot of silver. So silver wins on the supply side.
Yep.
Silver wins on the demand side. That's why I think the gains in silver are going to be triple the gains in gold.
Yep. As the ratio tightens. Yeah, absolutely.
The voice thinks the ratio is going to move to 25-1.
Yeah. Well, it'd be something
says
a little more
400 gold, 10,000 silver. I'm sorry. 10,000 gold and 400 silver.
Yeah.
But, these are just numbers thrown out that could be way down the road after numerous steps and numerous battles and numerous dead bodies. Because these are actual wars where owners of gold and their lawyers are being murdered by the U.S. Department of Treasury.
Literally.
Yes. Asian owners and their lawyers.
Unbelievable.
And a truce was called about a year ago.
Jeez.
Because the U.S. side also had some victims. Last I checked, the Asians know how to shoot a rifle. Last I checked. And the enforcer, Will, is the triad. The Hong Kong Mafia. The enforcer on the U.S. side, it's the Bush family. That's where the killers are.
So this is the war taking place on a global stage right in front of us.
Yeah, it's in front of us, but it's not easily seen because usually it's so-and-so, a reporter for San Francisco, died in a fiery car crash.
Right.
Okay, end of story.
Yep.
Actor Paul Walker was involved in a few nonprofit organization movements that the U.S. government didn't like. Paul Walker died in a fiery car crash.
I do find it interesting, Jim, how some of these voices, voices that might be dissidents, whether they be in the music industry, and I don't necessarily need to mention any names, but there's a band I was coming into last night, and these guys were talking about a lot of this crap in the 90s and early 2000s, and then they just went quiet. They just went quiet. It makes me, and I'm sure you could research, the band broke up, this guy's now doing this guy's doing that, but it makes you think, how many of these, people that have a voice, whether it be in the music industry, that clearly, once that voice of dissidence gets out there, they're clearly met with a lot of, restraint from the powers that be. They're either silenced or taken care of. Well,
it could be that one member of the band died mysteriously and you didn't hear about it.
Exactly. Yep. Or you did and you just thought it was he just died. Whatever, overdose.
And the rest of the band, they don't talk about it or else they'll get killed.
Exactly. Yep. And there's several of those instances where it's a music band, it's a comedian, it's a this, it's a that, an actor. There's lots of actors, that started talking about some of this stuff, and then all of a sudden you would expect them, they either went quiet or yeah.
Well, the actor James Woods?
Yes. Yeah.
He retired from Hollywood.
Did he?
He said, I got tired of all the Satanists running things. He said it's not just movies, it's the music and entertainment side.
Well, clearly all you have to do is look at current pop radio. Turn on MTV, look at a music video. It's like a satanic ritual. It's unbelievable.
I like pointing out a certain sequence. The 2012 Summer Olympics closing event in London was an obscene Satanist platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then in February, just 6 months later, you had the halftime ceremony for the New Orleans-based Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And the electricity got cut.
Interesting. Yeah, you've mentioned this to me before, Jim, that somebody perhaps in a place of power cut that electricity because they were sick of all this.
Right. The halftime ceremony did not take place with Beyonce. Beyonce and Katy Perry and Rihanna.
Yeah.
These are your Satanists. Lady Gaga.
Mm-hmm.
These are your Satanists. And they had a nice Satanist halftime show ready for you at the Super Bowl 2012. Didn't happen.
Good.
No, I'm sorry, 2013. February 2013. Olympics in 2012. That was quite an interesting story. It was a power outage for a good 45 or 50 minutes. And notice, the second half of the football game was just fine.
Yeah. Yep, no shortages there. Well, all you have to do is go watch like the American Music Awards or one of these ceremonies that these people put on, and it's disgusting. And I have like family members that actually, some people watch this crap. Oh, it's the Emmy whatever award ceremony that they're doing, and some of them are just, I mean, disgusting.
Oh, they tell me sometimes, Jim, a broom is just a broom. Yeah, that's a quote from Freud, a cigar just a cigar.
Right.
Okay, well, fine. Yeah, but take a look at the closing ceremonies of the London Summer Olympics of 2012. They did not miss any image.
No, they didn't. I remember the stadium. They had little lit up pyramids all around the stadium. It was just like the back of our $1 bill. You know?
Yeah. Well, oh boy, now we got a new $20 bill possibility here, and I think they're trying to condition us for a new dollar.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are going to say, well, we got a new dollar. Yeah, I've seen the $20 bill.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a new dollar and it's structured, dimwit.
Yep.
And they're going to say, oh, I didn't know about that. I got distracted by the $20 bill. I mean, there's more symbolism to this $20 bill decision, Will.
Mm-hmm.
Who's it replacing but Andrew Jackson?
Well, exactly, yeah.
Andrew Jackson was the biggest anti-central bank president in our history.
Yeah, the slayer, man. The central bank slayer.
Right. There's only one man who was perhaps rivaling Jackson in his anti-central bank position, and that was John Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. We know what happened to him.
So, Jackson, by the way, survived some assassination attempts.
Jim, is it fair to say that every single presidential assassination, maybe we'll go back and look at this, every single one that's taken place, the victim was anti-central banking?
Either anti-central bank or pro-gold, yes.
Okay, yeah.
McKinley, Buchanan.
Yep.
Lincoln was anti-London banker.
Mm-hmm. Hence the greenbacks when he told them to screw off with their 80% interest.
Right. He did not want to borrow money from the London bankers, so he had other devices. And, all you have to do is check London history.
Mm-hmm.
The op-ed pages of the London Times said that Lincoln must die.
Wow.
It was written by the bankers.
Yeah.
And, we had the Lee Harvey Oswald patsy
mm-hmm.
in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had the John Wilkes Booth patsy.
Yep.
They covered that up by having him killed.
Yep.
And by the way, Mudd, I can't think of his first name, the doctor who treated John Wilkes Booth.
Right.
He was a banker. So, this is very, very broad and very ugly, the history of the United States. And, I'm sad to say that genocide has been with our military for a very long time.
Oh, the Titanic. There's a good one. There's a good story for you as it pertains to central banking. and controlling powerful interests in our country.
Yeah, well, if you take a look at the passenger list on the Titanic, you see the CEO of Macy's on that, and a couple of others.
A lot of them were argued good guys. Yep.
Yeah. So it's pretty sad what's going on, but I remain optimistic for the future because it's not like I see no hope. It's not like I see no channel. There's a big yellow brick road. It's gold paved. It's got silver lining. That's how you save your butt.
Yeah. Well, I told you and I were talking just a few minutes ago, well, a couple hours ago off the line, or maybe this was yesterday, when I said, Jim, we'll know who's in control, whether it's good guys or bad guys, at least I will, when there's not these white streaks in a blue sky up above. When they're not spraying chemicals from airplanes anymore, I think we'll know who's in charge. But it is still taking place, at least last I checked.
It's taking place in a big, big way, and it's sad. I remember a year ago I got photos from clients of mine in the central northern states of the United States, and it was of the snow that was altered.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't really crystallized water.
Yep.
It was crystallized chemicals. And the pictures are unmistakable.
Yep.
It was snow coming off a roof, extending down 5 to 7 feet like a curtain.
Looked like melted plastic.
Yeah, it did. To me, it looked more like a curtain.
Yeah.
It's sad. I got New Mexico clients who tell me that every weekend they clean off the white dust in their vegetable garden. I said, what do you do, blow it off? He said, yeah, we blow it off, but we wipe it off the leaves for, say, the tomato plants, because we don't want any residual powder on there that doesn't come off from the blower.
Right.
And I said, well, why does New Mexico have so much powder? I don't hear about that in any other locations. This is a comment based on my switchboard,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the answer I got was, well, the upper winds, the trade winds over New Mexico, they're not really fast.
Right.
It's a desert climate with slow-moving winds, so the powder falls more.
Yeah.
In California, it doesn't, so you just have a tenfold rise in Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Jeez.
And maybe you have Alzheimer's. Will, have you thought about that?
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, who are you? Anyway, Jim, man, no, I'm on the coast, so I think unless they're spraying out above the sea, with the prevailing onshore wind, afternoon onshores that we have here, 350 days a year, it all blows inland. So yeah, anyway, Jim, I always love having you on, man. It's a pleasure. Your work is fantastic. For those of you out there not familiar with Jim's work, check out thegoldenjackass.com. We'll have links. The hat trick letter, he releases his hat trick letter, a very, very detailed publication. 50 pages sometimes, and it's unbelievable.
Lately there've been a pair of reports, and they're about 35 to 40 pages each. The one is the Global Money War report about big high-level battles regarding replacement of the dollar. The second one, monthly, is a golden currency report, and that's more ground level and actual demand from mints, and that's where I usually cover my Russia and China chapters. But this month is my 12th anniversary.
Wow! Congratulations, buddy. You've been battling quite some time.
Yeah, been at this for a long time, but I'd like to mention something on a more personal basis.
Okay.
I don't mind mentioning this because it's been so long. On Wednesday, I had my 29th anniversary of being free of all drugs.
Wow, congratulations, man.
I had a misspent college youth. It extended into my graduate school years and early career years, and I think it explains some of my crazy behavior with my first couple of jobs and managers who are wondering, who's this wild-eyed kid from Pennsylvania? Okay, well, I had my problems, but April 27th, 1987, that was when it all came to an end.
Congratulations,
and,
man.
500 meetings And they actually adopted me into Alcoholics Anonymous. I never drank. If I couldn't ride my bike or play a softball game or do something highly tennis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while high on weed, I didn't bother. I mean, I couldn't play tennis drunk.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't catch a. I once played with a frisbee and I got hit in the face with the frisbee. You can't do things like that. So I was a high performance druggie.
Yeah.
I was a stoner.
Yeah.
I was a stoner. I got wasted quite a lot on. I never went to an Ohio State football game straight. I went to every single one of them high. I mean, I had a wild youth, and in 1987 it all stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And remarkably, my work performance on the job improved. My relationships with the managers all improved. Relationship with my father and mother, especially my father, improved. And relationships with many friends improved. So, it's a success story, if you will. I feel good about it. And my father said to me yesterday, Jim, I'm very proud of you. You came a long way from being a nut
mm-hmm.
when you were young. And I said, yeah.
Now you're just a different kind of nut.
Now I'm a nut of a different variety. Yeah, I guess.
And I say that just lovingly, as you well know.
Well, I'm not a standard kind of personality. I'm still type A. I'm still opinionated. I still call a spade, and I still get into a little bit of trouble now and again with a lady friend or other friends. I got into big trouble with a gringo a-hole a few months ago. I told him where to get off. So it's it's a different world that I'm in, and I take a lot of joy in exercise, and I'm much more involved with my health, taking a lot of vitamins, and I eat well, and I don't eat red meat much, ever. I don't eat pork, ever. Oh, a woman friend of mine said, Jim, I can't see you today. I got all kinds of problems. I got diarrhea and this. I said, what'd you do, eat pork? She said, how'd you know? Man. I said, well, you never eat pork in Costa Rica.
We must have the same pork up here, or I just don't eat it enough, which I did as a kid, and so I guess I didn't have, But yeah, same pork up here, apparently.
Well, apparently the pork in Costa Rica is 3 times more toxic than the pork in United States. I got sick a couple times in my first year, and I thought, I'm just going to leave their pork alone.
Yeah.
It's not healthy. And there's one other thing that nailed me a couple times. It was avocado.
Really?
But I still eat a lot of avocado. Not a lot. I still eat them regularly. But if there's any softness at all to the avocado, don't eat it.
It'll mess you up, huh?
Yeah, oh boy, middle of the night, you name it. Open up an avocado. If there's any little dark area,
mm-hmm.
don't eat it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we eat them pretty regularly around here.
All you got to do is make sure they're ripe and not real old.
Make sure they're green. No problem.
And there are tremendous benefits from avocado. So anyway, the point is that I got a different life and a lot of good habits. And I'm upset that I can't run much anymore. I used to run twice a week, 3 miles, all through the 80s and 90s. 3 miles twice per week. It was kind of a healthy addiction. I felt odd if I didn't do it. So I moved from that to swimming a mile 3 times a week for several years. Mm-hmm. And now I don't swim and I don't run. I just ride my bike, and sometimes like a crazy man on the Sundays. On Sundays, the traffic is 70% less.
Huh.
Before noon. So I get on the main avenues, and hey, I'm right in the center lane. I have a destination. I go to the stadium that China built, Costa Rica, the football stadium, soccer football. Mm-hmm. I circle it and come home. It's a nice, 8 or 10 miles. And I come back drenched, have my juice, relax, sometimes take a nap.
Well, it's keep your
life without drugs, Will.
Keep your abolition.
Here's the weird part. I have a neighbor, and they do a lot of marijuana. Mm-hmm. Almost every time I walk past, it's flowing through the bottom of the door, and I smell it. Oh yeah, that's high quality. That's good weed. Oh yeah, that's. And they have a name for it. It's called creepy. C-R-I-P-I.
La creepy.
Huh?
La creepy.
Oh, I don't know what the full name is. But anyway, it's very high quality. Mm-hmm. I've never tried it, and I have no interest. I got friends who say, Jim, when you smell it, aren't you tempted? I said, no, I'm not tempted at all. Not at all. It's just there. It's like, graffiti on a wall. I pass by it. That's it. Mm-hmm. But it's high quality. Jim, aren't you tempted? And I said, no, I'm not. I've had many. I've had Colombian. I've had Jamaican. I've had Thai. I've had Hawaiian. My favorite was Hawaiian. And I left it alone in 1987. I'm done. I'm done with all the craziness. I don't want the insanity.
Well, buddy, congratulations. 29 years is a feat. Keep your...
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't even have a party at 20. Last year, I didn't even notice, and we got past April, and oh my gosh, April 27th passed, and I didn't even notice. So that's how far behind it is. I don't count the days.
Right.
For a while, I didn't even count the years. I had to calculate. Well, let me subtract. What was that, 27? No, it's 26. I didn't even count. And my brother's got a couple of years less. But I was a trailblazer. My brother said, well, if it worked for you, I'm going to do it too, Jim. I got tired of the craziness too. Mm-hmm. So it's induced insanity.
Well, keep your head clean, buddy, because your work is phenomenal, and we really appreciate it.
I'm not going to lose the intensity, and fortunately, I think the brain functions a little bit better. I'm not zoning out. Sometimes when I get on a topic and I say, I'm going to back this up with something, I go off to a tangent and I don't come back.
Yeah, well, that's just,
I think that's more normal than it is, a consequence of too many stoned out years.
Yeah, it's just fleeting.
Sometimes, actually, when I'm talking to you, I'll put a note. I'll quickly write 2 words so that I can come back.
Remember to come back to it, yeah.
Yeah, so, it's valuable to make one's own notes. Doing okay. Another day, another dollar, another disaster, and another 3 really whacked out stories. There's so much going on. It's just incredible. The quickening of events it's just exciting.
Yeah, things are speeding up.
Like today, let me just mention a couple of quick stories that came out today. Mm-hmm. The Finland Parliament is discussing openly in a debate after a petition with 50-something thousand signatures was submitted. The Finland Parliament is discussing their exit from the European Union. Okay, that's one. Then Gazprom announced annual profits that were up 5-fold. So it looks like the sanctions against Russia, once again, didn't mean a twit. Then there's a news story about Venezuela importing 500,000 barrels of oil from the United States in a tanker recently. They're so strapped in cash, Will, that they don't have enough cash to buy high-quality Nigerian oil to mix with their heavy crude, thick Orinoco heavy crude in Venezuela, to mix it together to make it exportable. Mm-hmm. So the cash crunch in Venezuela is now limiting their ability to export their own low-quality oil.
Wow. Yeah.
A lot of things going on. It's just exciting. I wish there were better news to talk about from the U.S. perspective, but when you adopt the Rubin doctrine of sell out tomorrow for another day of prosperity for Wall Street, that's the Rubin doctrine. Yeah. Sell out the future of America. to make sure that the profits look good for the next quarter in Wall Street. If you do the Rubin Doctrine for enough years, and then you adopt the fascist business model after 9/11 with an endorsement with the Patriot Act, you end up destroying the country. Mm-hmm. And I'm not speaking in silly exaggerations. They've destroyed the country. The too big to fail bank policy of rescues, they saved the banks at the expense of the economy. Mm-hmm. They wrecked the economy in order to keep the banks going. Mm-hmm. And now the banks are going to fall, and we're going to have a systemic failure of the country.
Yeah, and a massive concentration of wealth into the hands of the few who orchestrated the whole thing the whole time.
Yeah, that's part of the fascist business model that I discuss. I mean, it's just incredible what's going on. You can't bail out the banks like they have. You can't print money to bail out the government like they have. You can't wage war to defend the dollar like they have and expect that 2016 and 17 are going to be normal. No, they're going to be breakdown years. Mm-hmm. We're in 5 years now of QE, which is African, Zimbabwe monetary policy of hyper-monetary inflation, unsterilized, which means they don't drain money out of the system in order to push money into the system to cover the federal debt. They just add more money in like Robert Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. When are we going to wake up, Will, that we're running an African-style policy for the dollar?
Well,
we're not going to wake up until the rest of the world rejects the dollar. And where will they reject it? In the shipping ports. Mm-hmm. That is the big battleground right now.
Interesting, Jim. So the Venezuela story is could be used as sort of a microcosm example, could it not? I mean, downward spiral there. They've depreciated the currency so bad they're out of cash, and their main export they can't even export because they have no money, because there's no liquidity.
Well, they're exporting rice and beans, and therefore they're having food shortages.
Uh-huh.
I have a phrase that when you have a severe currency problem, crisis, you want to export everything you can. So they export anything that's not nailed down, and it causes shortages of what they exported.
Right.
And that, I think you call it a microcosm, and I think that's a very good word to use and an example. The United States could face that same situation where we export most of what is made in the United States in order to relieve the trade deficit, which is $500 billion a year.
Right.
If we have to come up with a new dollar for domestic only because we've lost the global currency reserve status, that's precisely the pressure that's going to have to be alleviated. You can't have a domestic only dollar without an immediate effect on it from the deficits. And it's $1 trillion annual federal deficit, which could, honestly, it could be filled and covered rather easily if they just confiscate all the 401 and all the IRA and all the KEO funds. That's about $1 trillion a year. So then they'd be left with the trade deficit, which is $45 billion a month, rather consistently, which is $500 billion a year, $500 billion. You cannot have a stable currency in that kind of deficit situation. And this is pressure that's coming, Will. It's coming like as certain as tomorrow's dawn. But I think the big story we were talking about before the recording is the silver breakout, which I featured in an article just a few days ago.
You did, yeah. Today is Friday, April 29th, and you had an article that came out this past Tuesday, the 26th, titled "Long-Awaited Gold Breakout." And you went into a couple different formations that silver, specifically silver, has shown. I think a daily and then a weekly. and with a price point anticipation of an $18 silver price breakout. And here we are today at, just pennies, literally pennies under $18. What caused you to, obviously write that article? That this breakout in the metals is a substantial one. What we've witnessed here, silver's up, 15-20% here in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, what motivated it was the big move in gold in January. I noticed that gold was moving in every major currency except the dollar. So I concluded that, give it a couple months and you'll see the dollar version of gold, gold in dollars, make its breakout. But there are a lot of people who have been thinking, and I have been among them, that gold will make the big breakout and then silver will come along and just fly on through after gold breaks down the door. Think of it as breaking down the door like in a Robin Hood movie, attacking the French castle. Remember the most recent Russell Crowe movie? They break down the door and then just run through. Well, the ones running through are not the ones who broke down the door. Often there are a lot of dead bodies from those who broke down the door. But what we see now in the last month is a very clear silver breakout. Now, I'm not talking about a multi-year breakout. I'm talking about a breakout from the resistance levels that have prevailed for the last several months, maybe even a year. So